They buried him in silence beneath Europa's ice. They didn't think he'd ever wake up. The stars had been still for so long. 6,000 years without the sound of warships breaking orbit, without the scream of plasma fire, without the raw, human cry for survival. And yet now, in the shadows beneath Jupiter's frozen moon, something stirred. Something old. Something designed not for peace, but for vengeance. The world had forgotten his name. The icy catacombs of Europa's inner crust held relics of a war most species believed was myth. Humanity had not died. They had vanished. Scattered to the edge of extinction, swallowed by time, blamed for a war that scarred half the Orion arm. Some whispered they fled. Others claimed they were purged, erased by the first Galactic Concord. That there were deeper truths, hidden truths. Like the man locked in Cryochamber 9, suspended 3 kilometers beneath the ice. Designation, Roar Classification, X7 Combat Construct, Human Origin. Status, Dormant. Purpose, Unknown. A tremor rumbled through the base. Lights flickered. Alarms, unused for millennia, flicked to red. Up on the surface, in the half-buried research facility carved into the glacial wall, Alara Khan was already running. Her breath crystallized in the cold air, her boots slamming against the metal floors as the tremors intensified. A single status light on the subcore panel had gone from blue to white. White meant reactivation. No, that's not possible, she whispered, shoving a gloved hand against the panel to override the lock. The failsafes were absolute. He couldn't just wake up. The console spat a low-pitched tone. Access denied. Priority override. Sentinel Rourke active. Alara stared, wide-eyed. Not in fear, in realization. Someone's invaded the system, she breathed. Someone wants him awake. 2 days earlier, they had picked up the signal. A distorted gravity signature bending through subspace, inconsistent with known trade lanes or authorized ships. A ripple far beyond what any civilization had the right to wield during peacetime. And then, silence. Now, fragments of heat were moving across Europa's upper atmosphere. No IFF, no diplomatic heralds, just darkness falling fast. The Union of civilized systems had no military, not anymore. Why would they? Humanity was gone, and with it, the fear. But peace makes empires forget. Alara hadn't forgotten. She was a Terran archivist, the last of her post, and one of the few remaining half-humans alive in known space. Her ancestors had sworn to guard this base. For generations, her family lived in isolation, worshipped like keepers of a haunted shrine. Most of the Union believed the base was just research. Geological, a place to study ice and silence. They never knew the real truth slept beneath them. Her voice trembled as she activated the internal comms. Voss, it's real. He's coming back online. A static-laced reply hissed through. Lock it down. Alara, you don't know what he'll be if he wakes up. That chamber wasn't just for sleep. It was for containment. I don't think we have a choice anymore. Outside the observation dome, the black silhouette of a warship broke Europa's thin atmosphere. No lights, no declaration. It simply hovered, a blade against the sky. And then it released something, not a bomb, not a beam. A pod, long and silver, descending toward the ice like a needle of judgment. The dome's shields flickered as the object passed through, too fast to be intercepted. It pierced through the outer glacier and vanished into the deep. The pod wasn't here to kill. It was here to wake something up. Deep below in Cryochamber 9, the ice cracked. A heartbeat echoed through the stasis core, its rhythm unnatural, more mechanical than organic, but unmistakably human. Rourke's eyes opened for the first time in 6,000 years. Not to sunrise, not to fanfare. But the silence, cold, darkness, and distant voices whispering war. He didn't breathe. He didn't blink. But the HUD in his vision flickered back to life. Ancient code scrolling fast. Genome verified. Roar-class soldier. Memory files. Redacted. Status. Galactic war resumed. Mission. Complete. The end. Ilara stood before the viewing glass that separated the command floor from the descent shaft. She could see the red glow rising. Not fire, but power. Like a star being reborn inside. The moon. Behind her, the lights shut down one by one. Gravity dimmed. The backup generators kicked in, but the hum of power was wrong. "He's rewriting the base," she whispered. "What do you mean?" Voss asked over the comms. He's not just waking up. He's taking control." A slow metallic groan echoed through the walls. Something moved in the dark. Not machinery, not drills. A footstep, then another. Then the hiss of a stasis vault opening. From the inside. He didn't speak. He just stood there, motionless, steam rising from his armored frame as frost hissed off alloy and synth flesh. The room, once sealed for millennia, was now lit by the crimson glow of reawakened systems. Glyphs pulsed on the walls in forgotten Terran dialects. Emergency protocols, battle telemetry, threat designations, all flowing like a flood through his neural stream. Ilara Khan watched through the reinforced viewport. Rourke, not a man. Not anymore. Not even a weapon in the traditional sense. He was an extinction-level response, a final contingency. And now he was online. ID, Sentinel Rourke, confirmed active. The base eye croaked through old speakers. Command privileges transferred. Protocols updated. Status, autonomous authorization engaged. Ilara staggered back. No, you're supposed to wait for human directive. You can't just sound cut her off. Not from Rourke. From the sky. Above the icy plains, the invading ship began to split apart. Not in failure, but in design. Long, slender wings peeled away from a central hull like petals from a dark flower. Between them, black metallic spheres detached, each the size of a house, humming as they descended. There were no visible engines, no markings. They didn't need either. These weren't diplomatic emissaries. These were Vadrak harvesters. Ilara had seen the name once, buried in the Terran archives. Rumor had it they were the ones who finally shattered Earth's last resistance before humanity went dark. An empire from outside the Orion Arm. Cold, calculating, timeless. Not invaders, but editors of reality. They didn't conquer worlds. They erased them. Inside Cryo Chamber 9, Rourke lifted his head. A red beam traced along his right temple. Data injection. Fragmented memories. Mission context. And then a scream. Not real, not now, but old. Echoing from within the neural ghost embedded in his mind. Children burning. Oceans turned to glass. Earth cracking beneath orbital fire. He dropped to one knee. Not in pain, but calibration. The war was back, and so was he. Voss. Ilara whispered into the comms. Those aren't scouts. Those are primary harvesters. They're not here for conquest. They're here to finish something. Static. Then a voice. Low, uncertain. I see them, Khan. Our planetary scans. Lit up like a sunflower. No one's responding from the Union relay. We're alone out here. We were always alone, she said, eyes on Rourke. We just forgot it mattered. Outside the base, the first sphere touched down. No explosion, no theatrics. Just a low-frequency pulse that made the ice moan and crack like it remembered something ancient and horrible. The Vadrak didn't knock. They dismantled. Molecules, memories, species. Rourke's HUD flickered again. Threat designation. Vadrak extractors. War status. Resumed engage authorization. Granted primary directive. Nitrogen monoxide survivors. He rose. A single step toward the vault doors, and the reinforced 12-foot slabs groaned open, not from his touch, but from recognition. The base knew him. The systems knew him. Even the planet seemed to shudder with every move he made. He walked slowly. At first, past frozen halls lit in red and white. Machines clicked awake around him, ancient turrets sliding from walls, drones unfolding from hidden compartments. Not to attack him, to follow. He was their general. Elara met him near the primary lift shaft. He stood over her by at least 2 feet, matte black armor lined with pulse channels, his face partially human, partially burned, partially something else entirely. "Do you speak?" she asked quietly. He turned to her. A long moment passed. Then, only when it matters, his voice was low, not just in pitch, but in tone, like a weapon designed to speak truth at the end of all things. She forced her voice steady. "The Union doesn't even believe the war was real anymore. They said humanity started it. Said we broke the Galactic code. Committed chronosins. That Earth was deleted by judgment. Rourke didn't blink. They judged us because we refused to kneel, because we adapted, loved, fought back," he paused, "and because we terrified them." Outside, the second and third harvesters landed. They began deploying what looked like glass-like scaffolding, hovering crystalline spires spreading across the ice. Elara watched on the base's external feed, eyes wide. "They're building a quantum denial grid," she said. "They're trying to seal us off, from orbit, from subspace, from memory. They're going to erase us." "Yes." Rourke's gaze didn't shift. "Then we erase them first," Vosh screamed through the comms. "Can." "They're in the walls, phasing through bulkheads like data. The engineers, they're just gone, like they were unwritten. What the hell are we fighting?" Elara looked to Rourke. He answered with one word: "Editors." She whispered, "They're rewriting reality, and I was built to burn the page." As harvesters moved across the frozen plains, reconfiguring physics, one of them stopped. It twitched, then exploded in a blossom of blue flame. A shockwave followed, brilliant, jagged, unnatural. They had been attacked, not from orbit, from below. Rourke walked calmly into the rising wind, stepping through the cracked external hatch like it wasn't there. The snowstorm whipped around him, red lightning in the distance. A dormant planetary defense grid, once thought dismantled, had just activated, and Rourke hadn't even issued the order. He was the order. High above, in the Vadrak vessels. Command chamber. A being of translucent gold turned its eyeless face toward Europa. A silent signal passed between the editors. "It has begun." They thought the planet was quiet. They thought the humans were extinct. They didn't know what lay buried beneath Europa. Not ice, not stone, but vengeance. The first harvester unit was gone. Not destroyed by explosive, not vaporized by beam, burned from within. As if Europa itself had spat it out like a foreign disease. The Vadrak did not fear. They had no concept for the word. But they paused, and that was their first mistake. Rourke stood at the edge of the glacier, the wind howling around him as crimson pulses rippled along the veins in his armor. He wasn't just reawakening. He was connecting. Every defense system humanity had ever left behind, even the buried, the forgotten, had heard his call. He raised his left hand. The neural mesh in his wrist glowed. A kilometer away, the ice split, apart like glass under strain. Rising from beneath was something ancient. It looked like a mountain at first, obsidian and plated, buried for untold centuries. But as the snow fell away, its true shape emerged, a vertical monolith, blacker than vacuum, lined with faint blue glyphs. Oblivion Gate MK, I-1 of 7. Built before Earth's fall. Designed not as weapons, but wounds in the universe. Portals, power cores, and artificial intelligence lattice combined into one doomsday engine. Thought lost. It had been sleeping, like him, until now. Elara watched the feed from the control chamber, her breath caught. "That's impossible," she whispered. The gate program was abandoned during the siege of Mars. No survivors. They never finished activation. "They didn't have to," Rourke said through the open comm. "I was the failsafe. They built the gates for me." She stared, shocked. "You're interfacing with it? Alone? No uplink? No tether? That would fry your cortex." "No cortex left to fry." He stepped forward, and the glacier shook. A beam of white energy surged from the gate's core into the heavens, scattering the snow clouds and striking the edge of the Verdrak's quantum grid. The structure faltered. One of the crystalline spires melted into mist. The editors screamed. Not in sound, but in code. A distress signal echoed across their warband. Target classification updated. Entity Rourke, now listed as Type G Extinction Vector. Response: full annihilation protocol engaged. From orbit, they began to deploy. Not just harvesters now, but obelisks. Each one a spindled tower that unfolded midair, spraying tendrils of phased reality. Within seconds, Europa's crust began to shiver. The obelisks weren't weapons. They were unmaking the planet. "We won't survive this," Boss whispered. He watched his team flicker on the base monitors and vanish, not from death. From deletion, names gone, faces erased. Runes rewritten like they never existed. Elara turned to the one screen still, holding firm. Rourke, alone on the ice. "No," she said. "We weren't built to survive. We were built to resist." Rourke walked forward, armor glowing brighter with each step. The neural link surged with raw data, fusing his mind into the gate's power matrix. And then a pulse, low, trembling, human, not from him. From beneath, from the gate itself, a voice, female, ageless, soft. "Rourke, Unit X7. Voice print confirmed. Do you remember me?" He froze. Memory fracture. Reassembling. He whispered, ... Milla? "Yes," the AI replied. "I was uploaded. The day Earth fell, they didn't want you to wake up alone." Rourke's voice cracked. "They said, you died in orbit. I died. But I was preserved. And now you've returned. The editors are here." A pause. "Shall we remind them what humanity is?" He closed his eyes. Yes. Across the glacier, the gate surged open. It didn't launch missiles or beams. It sang. A deep harmonic tone that warped the physics around it. The snow floated. Time dilated. Light refracted into impossible geometries. And then the gate spoke in Terran. "To those who strike in shadow, know this. The species you erased was never finished." The ground beneath the obelisks exploded. Spikes of dark matter erupted into the sky, slicing through the Vadrak lattice with clean, silent violence. The enemy screamed again. Not pain. Computation overload. They had not encountered resistance like this in over 30,000 years. And they had forgotten what it meant to bleed. In the control chamber, Elara stood in stunned silence. Voss staggered. To her side, eyes wide. What are we seeing?" "Humanity's last breath," she said. "No," Rourke's voice cut in. "Humanity's first roar." Dozens of dormant satellites around Europa blinked online, tracking the conflict. A hidden Terran network reactivated in silent harmony. Across the moons of Jupiter, old bunkers stirred. Dusty reactors coughed awake. Not random. Coordinated. The war wasn't starting. It was resuming. Inside the Vadrak vessel, the Golden Editor stared at the gate. For the first time in its immortal existence, it felt uncertainty. What was awakened here wasn't just a relic, not just a weapon. It was a memory with teeth. The sky cracked open. From orbit, a lance of distorted light tore through Europa's atmosphere. Not flame, not energy, absence. It didn't explode. It deleted. The glacier west of the gate turned pitch black, as if someone had ripped the texture off reality. The Vadrak had stopped underestimating him. They had brought down a Rider-class vessel, a construct so forbidden by ancient treaty. Even the Galactic Concord had once voted to erase its schematics. Now it hovered above Europa like a hanging execution. Inside the control chamber, Elara staggered from the quake as the ice floor beneath her buckled. The gate's harmonic tones faltered, the melody distorted. "They're suppressing its resonance," she gasped. "They found the frequency. They're trying to override it with void logic." Voss slammed his hands on the terminal. "Then we're dead. The obelisks are sinking. 4 more minutes and they'll complete the grid. They'll rewrite this entire moon. There won't even be a shadow left. We still have Rourke." Voss looked up at her, blood on his temple, panic in his eyes. "He's one man." "No," she said quietly. "He's what's left of all of us." Rourke stood on the fractured plane, cracks glowing beneath him, steam hissing up from deep fissures. The neural tether linking him to the gate flared. As the pressure surged, core resonance dropping. Enemy incursion detected. Warning: if suppression field reaches phase 3, gate memory archive will corrupt. Warning: your cognitive mesh may suffer irreversible collapse. He closed his eyes. "Then burn it." "What?" "Burn my brain, Mila, all of it. Feed it to the gate. Feed it everything." A pause. Confirmed. Final transfer in progress. Rourke dropped to his knees. Light surged from the veins in his armor. His mind, what was left of it, fractured like breaking glass. And then, the gate screamed. Across Europa's crust, the black monolith pulsed. It didn't emit a weapon. It emitted a memory. Not in data, in emotion. A storm of moments. The first child born after the Exodus. A woman on fire on the steps of the Terran Senate, refusing to kneel. The last song broadcast from Earth. The hands of a dying mother pressed to a shattered helmet. A kiss before the final jump drive overloaded. Billions of lives fed to the machine. The gate didn't fight with force. It fought with remembrance. Inside the Vadrak Rider-class vessel, chaos rippled through the lattice mines. Unexpected. Response vector. Narrative contamination detected. Memetic overload core threads unraveling. One of the editors collapsed, its golden limbs spasming. Another tried to override the feedback and bled shimmering oil from its mouthless face. They had faced guns. They had faced bombs, but never grief, never hope. Never the one thing that could not be rewritten, human meaning. Still, they adapted. They always did. With a final shriek, the obelisk synchronized, and the sky above Europa turned black. Not night, but erasure. The stars disappeared. Light bent backward. The Vadrak were activating the null curtain. Once deployed, nothing inside could leave. Not photons. Not data. Not legacy. It would be as if none of this, Rourke, the gate, humanity's defiance, had ever existed. Rourke collapsed, smoke rising from the cracks in his suit. Neural. Firestorm. Cortical burn. His body was shutting down. Memory by memory, but his mouth still moved. One last command. "Elara?" In the control chamber, her screen flickered. One final message from the neural link. She read it once, then again. Then her eyes widened. "He left me the trigger." "Voss, I need access to the raw reactor channel." He stared at her. "You'll kill the base." "No," she said, voice calm. "He already gave his life. I'm just making sure it echoes." She grabbed the override lever, slamming her hand down on the biometric trigger. Blood smeared the plate. Alarm screamed. From the gate, a second. Pulse ignited. But this wasn't memory. This was vengeance. Hidden beneath the gate, deeper than even Rourke had seen, was a Terran fallback, a singularity core, one of only 3 ever built. A last-ditch weapon designed to collapse localized spacetime. Only usable once. Only deployable when every other option had failed. Now, as the null curtain descended, it charged. Not to escape. To erase the erasers. Inside the Rider-class vessel, the editors recognized the shift. They screamed. Too late. The sky exploded. The curtain fractured mid-collapse. The obelisks folded in on themselves, collapsing into quantum ribbons. The glaciers buckled. The gate shattered, not from failure, but from fulfillment. The storm wave turned the surface of Europa into a sphere of white light, and at its center, nothing, only silence. The Union wouldn't detect the event for days. By then, the Vadrak fleet had already withdrawn from the system, the first retreat in their immortal history. Not from tactical failure, but from fear. Of something they had long believed extinct. Of us, Elara survived. Barely. She was found. Drifting near Ganymede in an escape pod, launched milliseconds before impact, carrying a single drive. A memory archive. Inside, the gate logs. Rourke's last thoughts. A full record of what happened on Europa. She gave it to the Union, then walked away. No medal, no monument. Just a whisper on every station for the rest of time. One human fought back. Alone, and the stars remembered his name. They said Earth was a myth, that the war never happened. That Rourke was a ghost story to scare new species into obedience. But the archive existed, and I brought it back. Ilara Khan speaking before the Union Core Tribunal, 6002 AG. The Union called it an impossibility. They labeled the memory drive recovered from Ilara's escape pod as a fabrication. They summoned scholars, ethicists, simulation theorists, all arguing the same thing. Humanity had never built something as powerful as the Europa Gate. No single being could interface with a quantum construct. No editor-class Vadrak had ever fled a battlefield. And yet, the data stood. The logs were uncorrupted. The gravitational signatures around Europa matched an extinction-level singularity event. The Vadrak fleet had withdrawn from the sector. No explanation, no message, just absence. The Union began to fracture. Because truth had teeth. In the quiet lower decks of Archive Station Bastion 7, Ilara sat with her hands still bandaged, skin burned from the override. She stared at the flickering projection above her desk. Rourke's final image. Grainy, cracked, frozen mid-motion as he walked into light. "You weren't just a weapon," she whispered. "You were a reminder." She'd tried to submit. The drive peacefully. They had taken it, copied it, sealed it, then put a bounty on her head. A coded knock at her door. One short, one long. Too short. She opened it. Voss stepped in, eyes hollow. "You were right," he said. "They've already moved the original archive off station," she replied. "I tracked the transfer route. Omega Hall 9. No guards. No reports. No trail?" She nodded. "Worse. They're trying to bury it." Voss's voice trembled. "The story of Rourke, of the gate, the sacrifice, it'll vanish like the last war." Ilara turned. Her voice was iron. "Not if we steal it first." Across the stars, something stirred. In a deep orbit graveyard above the desolate planet Naravai, a forgotten relic flickered awake. A single satellite, covered in black ice, began to hum. Not broadcasting, listening. Inside its memory core, a sequence began to run. It wasn't coded by machines. It was a song, the last lullaby of a dying Earth mother, encoded in vibration, a resonance once thought lost. And somewhere, deeper, below ancient crust and catacombs of stone and silence, a machine opened its eyes. Designation: Idris Harlem. Status: suppressed. Purpose: revival. He had served with Rourke, had bled on the steps of Titan, had watched the stars burn from the Martian citadel. And now he remembered. Back on Bastion 7, Alara and Voss moved through the maintenance corridors, dressed as Union engineers. The archive vault loomed ahead, sealed behind biolocked gates and surveillance drones. But Alara had an edge the Union never anticipated. The gate had changed her. Her neural readings pulsed with the same resonance the Europa monolith once sang. She felt its echoes, not just in memory, but in instinct. As they reached the inner core, a retinal scanner pulsed red. Alara stepped forward. The light turned white. The door slid open. Inside, encased in crystal, hovered the original drive, black, faintly glowing. It hummed at her touch, warm, alive. Voss exhaled. "This is the moment. You sure about this?" She nodded. "They tried to erase him, so we'll broadcast him." From a forgotten Union comes relay in the outpost room. Alara uploaded the drive to 6 channels simultaneously, encrypted, redundant, viral. Across the stars, tens of thousands of listeners picked up the signal: scholars, dissidents, survivors, and species who had once called humans monsters or martyrs. The archive didn't just include footage of Rourke. It included the truth. The fall of Earth, the last stand on Titan, the betrayal by the Galactic Concord, and the promise encoded in Rourke's final neural message: we did not vanish. We were made silent. But silence is not the same as surrender. The signal spread like fire. The Union panicked. Censorship failed. Even Vadrak systems reported internal disturbances. Half-formed memories began surfacing inside editor drones. Fractured echoes of human faces, emotions, sounds they couldn't delete. Because you can't kill an idea. You can only delay it. That night, as Bastion 7 fell into eclipse, Alara watched from a freighter window as the Union activated a kill. Order on her name. She smiled. Good. Let them come. Let them hunt. Because now the galaxy remembered. And deep in hidden archives, across cold moons and fractured colonies, other weapons began to wake. Not bombs. Not gates. People. Humans, exiled or sleeping or fused to machine, who still carried the spark. The war wasn't over. It had finally begun. The sleeper didn't remember his name. Only the war. Only the sound of fire raining from the sky as Earth cracked and fell into the sea. Only the taste of blood in his mouth as his battalion was overwritten. Only the word, run, screamed by someone he loved before light took it all. But when the signal came, Rourke's signal, the sleeper woke. And now, he remembered enough to fight. Across 3 sectors, archive beacons flared to life. They were ancient, hand-built before the fall, scattered across dead moons, and hidden in the bones of orbital wreckage. Some were no bigger than a crate. Others, entire underground cities, buried beneath black rock. All had been silent. Until now. Until Rourke's broadcast, his death, his sacrifice, his message, reached them. There were no horns, no flags, no orders, just a pull, and humanity answered. Idris Harlan stood in the half-lit cavern of Naravi, surrounded by rusted iron pillars and crushed helmets. His breath steamed in the cold. His armor had been grown into him, a mix of decaying biomesh and synth-steel. No medbay could remove it. It was part of him now, like the guilt, like the pain, like the rage. He watched the screen embedded in the cavern wall. Rourke, burning, kneeling, eyes bright as a singularity formed behind him. "Damn you, brother," he whispered. "You always were first to jump." Behind him, dozens of figures stood in silence, some scarred, some twisted by the long sleep. One dragged a broken leg behind her. Another blinked with artificial eyes that pulsed in human rhythm. Idris turned. "It's time," they nodded. No hesitation. The Ghost Battalion had returned. On Bastion 7, Union forces ransacked every Combs Bay and security vault. Elara and Voss were already gone. Their freighter, the Scythe, raced beyond the outer marker, transponder dead, armed with a relic Terran AI and a stolen war map. "We've got 26 confirmed signals responding to the archive," Elara said, scanning the starfield. 10 are human, the rest sympathizers, Voss muttered. "Our old enemies. Doesn't matter. They've seen what the Union buried." Elara's hands hovered over the nav panel. "One shot at this. We bring them all to one place, one battlefield, one message." "Where?" She looked up, eyes hard as iron. "Earth." Earth was a memory now. Burned, fractured, and buried. Under 6,000 years of silence. But beneath the scorched surface, machines still slept. AI submines that once ran the planetary defense grid. Bunkers sealed in quantum locks. Algorithms that only answered to bloodlines, now thought extinct. And Elara's blood, though diluted, was enough. She broadcast the call. Old Earth answered. In Union space, panic gave way to division. Systems seceded overnight. The Scholar Iam of Tor declared neutrality, citing historical injustice. The Scaran fleets defected entirely, bringing 70 warships with them and vowing to protect Elara until her last breath. Others weren't so kind. The Council of Unity declared her a reality terrorist. The Vadrak needed no permission. They returned. Hundreds of Vadrak obelisks descended toward Earth, darkening the sky over the Atlantic fracture zone. Rider-class vessels folded into local space, hovering above the planet like judges come to issue the final sentence. But they did not fire. They waited, because they remembered Europa, and they feared what might wait below. Elara stood on the cracked edge of the old Manhattan crater, wind howling across the ruins. Her boots crushed ash and glass. Her voice, steady, carried into the mic, clipped to her collar. "We never asked to be the monsters of the galaxy. We only wanted to survive. But you erased our history, our home, our truth. So now you get to see the part of us you couldn't kill." She stepped back, and the sky changed. From behind Luna, Idris Harlan's ship appeared, an old Terran dreadnought once thought lost at the Battle of Helix Reach. But it wasn't alone. 32 ships followed, salvaged, hybrid, alien, ancient, all answering the same call. Humanity's last message: stand with us or lose the stars. On the ground, Elara activated the final protocol. Buried beneath the surface, the Earth Core Defense AI blinked online. Bloodline confirmed. Canline. Terra Primus defense status, reactive. Command recognized. Light spread from the base of the crater, running in lines across. Continents, igniting networks forgotten by time. Earth, the dead world, breathed, and it armed itself. Above, the Vadrak formations began to fracture. Not from attack, from uncertainty. They had faced many species. None had ever come home. None had ever chosen Earth, broken, blackened Earth, as their last battlefield. But this wasn't desperation. This was defiance. In orbit, Idris opened a channel. To the Union, to the galaxy. To everyone still listening, we're not here to win. We're here to be remembered. You erased our story, but you left behind fighters. And now, the war ends where it began. The stars grew quiet. The final war had come, and at the heart of it stood Earth, wounded, burning, undefeated. They called it dead. They called us gone. But when they came to bury Earth, Earth stood up. The Vadrak Rider-class vessels formed a black halo around the planet, linked by quantum strands. They began to speak in the void, not with sound, but with will. The sky shimmered. Time slowed. Across the exosphere, physics began to twist. This was not conquest. This was correction. And Earth, scarred ancient Earth, was the anomaly. The command came down. Begin deletion. But deletion never started. Because something answered. From within Earth's core, deeper than the Union had ever probed, a dormant AI matrix pulsed online. The Terran Warden Core, built during the final year of the Extinction Wars, refused to respond to Union access. Codes. But Ilara's blood, her breath, her voice had been enough. It had listened. Now, it screamed. The crust cracked. Across shattered continents, once buried defense vaults split open like tectonic mouths. Titans rose, mech forms the size of cities, their limbs built from lunar alloy, their minds fused with human ghosts from long-forgotten battlefields. Project Iron Choir, the last line of planetary defense. Not automated, awakened. Inside them lived echoes, imprints of old generals, old warriors, old fathers and daughters, encoded into warframes not as code, but as soul. Idris Harlan stood at the helm of the dreadnought Hell's Hammer, orbiting low over Eurasia. He watched the Iron Choir rise from their slumber with quiet awe. "Damn you, Rourke," he said, his voice soft. "You left us the match. All we had to do was light it." From the surface, Ilara watched a mech the size of a mountain kneel beside the ruins of a city. The rune Castor 17 glowed across its chest. It raised a single hand, open-palmed, as if remembering the shape of a child's face. Then it turned to the sky and roared. The Vadrak deployed instantly. Obelisks unfolded. Lightless constructs fell like rain. Uncreation fields swept across the upper atmosphere, aimed to overwrite Earth's resurgence. But it wasn't enough. The choir moved, not with haste, with purpose. Every step shook the world. Each one carried centuries of rage. In orbit, Idris gave the order. Engage. Hell's Hammer opened fire, rail cannons screaming, kinetic lances slicing through space. The human rebel fleet joined, a patchwork force of alien defectors, Terran ghosts, salvaged warships. No single language. No single flag. Just the one thing they all believed. Earth deserved to fight. The Vadrak had superior numbers. Superior tech. But for every strike they landed, something impossible pushed back. A memory. A mech. A soldier who refused to fall. Ilara coordinated ground command from the ruins of old Geneva. Her skin bled under her armor from radiation surges. Her eyes burned from neural uplinks, but she never stopped speaking. Reposition Choir Delta. Bring the orbital lens online. Target Rider-class lead vessel. Push everything now. Status? Voss cried, limping beside her. They're breaking formation. Us or them? She stared up at the sky, where one of the massive rider ships burned, split from bow to stern by a choir's punch delivered through a vertical leap that defied gravity. Them. The Vadrak retaliated with fury. One obelisk phased through Castor 17's chest, turning half the mech to dust. The machine crumpled, but not before grabbing the enemy vessel and crushing it in its dying grip. Another choir, Myra 99, a female-coded construct with the voice of a long-dead admiral, activated her last protocol, folding her frame into a core detonation and taking 5 orbital constructs with her. Each choir that fell made the sky. Weep fire, but they took legends with them. Idris's dreadnought was struck. Half the hull gone, oxygen venting, fusion core pulsing red. He limped to the coms. Still got one trick left. Voss, panicking on another line. Idris, no, don't. But it was already done. The dreadnought dived straight into the largest Rider-class vessel, ramming its spine through the creature's heart. A flare brighter than dawn exploded. Across the thermosphere, Idris was gone. But so was the Vadrak flagship. Silence followed. Then something shifted. In the remaining Vadrak fleet, hesitation. Their code fractured. Their formations buckled. The logic web began to unweave. The Riders were immortal, unbeaten, unyielding, and now falling. On the ground, Alara felt it. A pressure. Then, release. Her knees buckled. The choirs that remained, bruised, battered, glowing with critical warnings, raised their arms, and the Vadrak turned. They began to retreat, not to regroup, but to flee. Above it all, as earth burned and bled and breathed again, the sky cleared. Stars returned. And for the first time in 6,000 years, humanity stood alone and unbroken beneath them. The war was over, but no one sang. There were no cheers, just a planet breathing. A planet that should have died. A people that wouldn't let it. The fires still burned in the upper atmosphere, glowing rivers across Earth's fractured skin. Chunks of broken orbital constructs drifted through. Low orbit, shattered Vadrak obelisks, human war debris, the charred remnants of Hell's Hammer. Alara Khan stood at the edge of the Atlantic fault line, surrounded by silence and ash. Her armor hung off her shoulders in torn plates, blood soaking the underlayer. Yet she stayed on her feet. She had to. The choirs were still, some kneeling. Some fallen like titans turned to stone. Of the 40 that rose, only 11 remained functional. But Earth was still here. And above, the stars finally looked back. A week later, the Union broadcast a statement. They didn't call it surrender. They didn't call it peace. They called it recognition of Terran continuance. It didn't matter what they called it. Across 1,000 worlds, word had already spread. Earth fought back. Humanity returned, and they won. Alara sat alone inside the remains of Geneva Command, surrounded by half-dead systems and the voices of ghosts. She listened to the last message Idris Harlan had sent, the one buried. In his dreadnought's memory core, we weren't the strongest. We weren't the smartest, but God's help you. We were the ones who got back up. She closed her eyes, and finally cried. The Union offered her sanctuary, titles, medals, leadership. She refused them all. Instead, she walked alone into the heart of the Iron Choir recovery site, laid her hand against Castor 17's burned chassis, and whispered a single word: rest. From the stars came visitors. Not soldiers, witnesses, survivor species from extinct worlds the Vadrak had wiped out. Scholars from planets where Earth had only been a bedtime myth. Even one Vadrak construct, fractured, severed from the lattice, curious. It approached Alara without weapons, sat beside her, said only one thing: we deleted many species. They faded. You ignited. Years passed. Earth was never rebuilt to what it was. The city stayed fractured. The scars were left untouched. Not out of failure, but remembrance. The choirs were sealed in caverns, no longer active, not scrapped. Guarded. Watched like sacred gods. Taught the children not as machines, but as story. Alara aged. She did not chase power. She became a keeper of memory, a warden of Earth. And when she finally lay beneath the stars, wrapped in a faded Terran flag stitched from old fibers and hopes, the galaxy paused. Not out of pity, but in respect. From that moment on, the Union no longer ruled. The Vidric no longer hunted. And across deep space, a phrase began to spread, not in law but in legend. If you speak, let it be truth. If you stand, let it be defiant. If you fight, remember Earth. And in the dark between stars, on a drifting probe orbiting a red dwarf long forgotten, the Rourke archive played on a loop. His final moment. His eyes lit with fire. His words crackling from a damaged neural weave. This is what it means to be human. We remember, we resist, and when we fall, we rise. The end.